Hello and welcome to our video on Jack the Ripper, the infamous serial killer who terrorized the streets of London in the late 19th century. Even after more than a century, the mystery of Jack the Ripper remains unsolved. In this video, we will delve into the details of the case and explore some of the possible suspects. Jack the Ripper is believed to have killed at least 5 women in the Whitechapel area of London between August and November 1888. All the victims were prostitutes, and their throats were slashed. Some of the victims were also mutilated. Despite the best efforts of the police and the public, Jack the Ripper was never caught, and his true identity remains a mystery. The first 2 cases in the Whitechapel murders file, those of Emma Elizabeth Smith and Martha Tabram, are not included in the canonical 5. Smith was robbed and sexually assaulted in Osborne Street, Whitechapel, at approximately 1:30 a.m. on 3 April 1888. She had been bludgeoned about the face and received a cut to her ear. A blunt object was also inserted into her vagina, rupturing her peritoneum. She developed peritonitis and died the following day at London Hospital. Tabram was murdered on a staircase landing in George Yard, Whitechapel, on 7 August 1888. She had suffered 39 stab wounds to her throat, lungs, heart, liver, spleen, stomach, and abdomen, with additional knife wounds inflicted to her breasts and vagina. All but one of Tabram's wounds had been inflicted with a bladed instrument such as a penknife, and with one possible exception, all the wounds had been inflicted by a right-handed individual. Tabram had not been raped. The savagery of the Tabram murder, the lack of an obvious motive, and the closeness of the location and date to the later canonical Ripper murders led police to link this murder to those later committed by Jack the Ripper. The canonical 5 Ripper victims are Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. The first victim was Mary Ann Nichols, who was found dead on August 31, 1888. The body of Mary Ann Nichols was discovered at about 3:40 a.m. on Friday 31 August 1888 in Bucks Row, now Durward Street, Whitechapel. Nichols had last been seen alive approximately 1 hour before the discovery of her body by a Mrs. Emily Holland, with whom she had previously shared a bed at a common lodging house in Thrall Street, Spitalfields, walking in the direction of Whitechapel Road. Her throat was severed by 2 deep cuts, one of which completely severed all the tissue down to the vertebrae. Her vagina had been stabbed twice, and the lower part of her abdomen was partly ripped open by a deep, jagged wound, causing her bowels to protrude. 1 week later, on Saturday 8 September 1888, the body of Annie Chapman was discovered at approximately 6 a.m. near the steps to the doorway of the backyard of 29 Hanbury Street, Spitalfields. As in the case of Nichols, the throat was severed by 2 deep cuts. Her abdomen had been cut entirely open, with a section of the flesh from her stomach being placed upon her left shoulder and another section of skin and flesh, plus her small intestines, being removed and placed above her right shoulder. Chapman's autopsy also revealed that her uterus and sections of her bladder and vagina had been removed. Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes were both killed in the early morning hours of Sunday 30 September 1888. Stride's body was discovered at approximately 1 a.m. in Dutfield's Yard, off Burner Street, now Enrique Street, in Whitechapel. The cause of death was a single clear-cut incision, measuring 6 inches across her neck, which had severed her left carotid artery and her trachea before terminating beneath her right jaw. The absence of any further mutilations to her body has led to uncertainty as to whether Stride's murder was committed by the Ripper. Eddowes's body was found in a corner of Mitre Square in the City of London, 3/4 of an hour after the discovery of the body of Elizabeth Stride. Her throat was severed from ear to ear and her abdomen ripped open by a long, deep and jagged wound before her intestines had been placed over her right shoulder, with a section of intestine being completely detached and placed between her body and left arm. The left kidney and the major part of Eddowes's uterus had been removed, and her face had been disfigured, with her nose severed, her cheek slashed, and cuts measuring 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch respectively vertically incised through each of her eyelids. The police surgeon who conducted the post-mortem upon Eddowes's body stated his opinion these mutilations would have taken at least 5 minutes to complete. The extensively mutilated and disemboweled body of Mary Jane Kelly was discovered lying on the bed in the single room where she lived at 13 Millers Court, off Dorset Street, Spitalfields, at 10:45 a.m. on Friday 9 November 1888. Her face had been hacked beyond all recognition, with her throat severed down to the spine, and the abdomen almost emptied of its organs. Her uterus, kidneys and one breast had been placed beneath her head, and other viscera from her body placed beside her foot, about the bed and sections of her abdomen and thighs upon a bedside table. The heart was missing from the crime scene. The police were under immense pressure to catch the killer, but they had very little evidence to go on. The vast majority of the City of London police files relating to their investigation into the Whitechapel murders were destroyed in the Blitz. The surviving Metropolitan Police files allow a detailed view of investigative procedures in the Victorian era. A large team of policemen conducted house-to-house inquiries throughout Whitechapel. Forensic material was collected and examined. Suspects were identified, traced, and either examined more closely or eliminated from the inquiry. Modern police work follows the same pattern. More than 2,000 people were interviewed, upwards of 300 people were investigated, and 80 people were detained. Following the murders of Stride and Eddowes, the Commissioner of the City Police, Sir James Fraser, offered a reward of £500 for the arrest of the Ripper. The murders had taken place in dark alleys and streets, and there were no eyewitnesses. Hundreds of letters claimed to have been written by the killer himself, and 3 of these in particular are prominent: the "Dear Boss" letter, the "Saucy Jackie" postcard, and the "From Hell" letter. The only clues they had were some letters supposedly written by Jack the Ripper. The name, Jack the Ripper, originated in the "Dear Boss" letter, written by an individual claiming to be the murderer, which was disseminated in the press. However, the authenticity of these letters has been questioned, and it is not clear whether they were really written by the killer. There have been many theories about who Jack the Ripper might have been. Some people believe that he was a doctor or a butcher, as the precision of the cuts on the victims' bodies suggested that the killer had some medical knowledge. Others have opined that the killer was an educated upper-class man, possibly a doctor or an aristocrat who ventured into Whitechapel from a more well-to-do area. Such theories draw on cultural perceptions such as fear of the medical profession, a mistrust of modern science, or the exploitation of the poor by the rich. The term, Ripperology, was coined to describe the study and analysis of the Ripper case in an effort to determine his identity, and the murders have inspired numerous works of fiction. One of the most famous suspects was a man named Aaron Kosminski, who was a Polish immigrant living in Whitechapel at the time of the murders. He was known to be mentally unstable and had a history of violence towards women. However, there is not enough concrete evidence to prove that he was Jack the Ripper. In conclusion, the mystery of Jack the Ripper remains unsolved to this day. Despite the efforts of many investigators and researchers, we may never know the true identity of the killer. The case of Jack the Ripper has become a cultural phenomenon, inspiring countless books, films, and TV shows. However, we must remember that at the heart of this story are the lives of 5 women who were brutally murdered. We should never forget their names, and we should always strive to bring justice to those who have been wronged. Here you go, the one of the cruelest serial killer of the world history. If you like this type of video, please support us by subscribing our channel.